And address that. So without much further introduction, many people will have heard of David. I've met David a number of years ago. I think the first time was the World Conference Against Racism, and then we met again in Barbados for the an African Descendants Conference. And I think you've been at every CARICOM gathering, as have I, and of course we met in Suriname and so on and so forth. So I'm going to let David say the rest, but I hope you will take the opportunity to ask David some questions and let's make some connection. And there will be further events. Saturday at the Mahat Center where David will be speaking as well, and Sunday, so there will be more time for more questions and also to hear more about Ajay's earlier presentation. So David, the house, David.
One cause, one goal, one destiny.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Brothers and sisters, it is a real pleasure of mine to be here at the Bernie Grant Arts Center. And let me begin by acknowledging a debt to Bernie Grant, because it was Bernie Grant who introduced me to the concept of reparations and the Reparations Movement. Bernie Grant contacted me in Barbados in the early 90s, maybe 1991, 92. And Bernie Grant would send information to me in Barbados, booklets, newspaper articles. It was through Bernie Grant that I learned about the group of eminent persons on reparations, the OAU's Reparations Commission. And we brought Bernie Grant to Barbados, and he addressed us at the steel shed in Bridgetown. He brought the reparations message to Barbados. So we are very grateful and thankful to Bernie Grant, and we honor him, and I consider it to be a great honor that I can give this talk in a center named after Bernie Grant. I also want to thank my brother, Glenroy Watson, and the union that he represents, the Global African Congress that I am a member of as well, for making this gesture to invite me to be here. Glenroy, thank you very much, comrade. Brothers and sisters, I want to begin by describing some of the hats that I wear, because some of the hats that I wear will give you a clue as to why I think about reparations in the way that I think about it. I am presently the chairman of the Caribbean Pan-African Network. That is a Pan-Africanist organization, a network of Pan-Africanist organizations in the Caribbean. We have members in some 17 Caribbean countries. Our headquarters is in Trinidad and Tobago, where the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago is one of our key members. And we are involved in a relationship with the African Union. In fact, we were established in the year 2004 to be the network that coordinates the Caribbean region for engagement with the African Union in terms of the six-region initiative. And I believe that everybody should know about the six-region initiative, but basically it is this idea that the African Union has, that Africa has 6 regions: north, west, south, east, central, and the 6th region being the diaspora. So there's this concept that the diaspora is to be integrated. And I must say it has been very slow going, but So far, we have membership in the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union. Now, my organization, CPAN, is a member of the General Assembly of that council called ECOSOC. And I am a member of a subcommittee that is redrafting the constitution of ECOSOC. And I have been frustrated by the fact that since 2004, we have not been able to accomplish the full representation of the diaspora, at least in the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. So I'm trying to use my position on that subcommittee to redraft the ECOSOC constitution that diaspora representation is not a matter of anybody's discretion now. It is built into the constitution itself. So I'm hoping that we can accomplish that in the very near future. And at present, the African Union is carrying out a legal analysis. Now, ECOSOC is civil society. ECOSOC is the civil society parliament of the African Union. So it is not difficult to see how civil society from the diaspora could be a member of ECOSOC. But the African Union is now carrying out a legal analysis to see how, at a broader level, at a political level, what are the legal implications for involving black governments of the Caribbean, for example, in the structures of the African Union, right? Now, I am the chairman of CPAN, I believe, because I have had a background in Pan-Africanism as the director of the Barbados government's Commission for Pan-African Affairs. I was the director for about 7 years. I helped to establish that institution. It's an institution of the government of Barbados. It's a governmental department. And I just want to share with you perhaps the central experience I had as the director of the Commission for Pan-African Affairs. The central experience I had centered around the United Nations World Conference Against Racism. I led the Barbados governmental delegation in most of the meetings having to do with that World Conference, right? So I was involved intimately in all the negotiations pertaining to that conference. Now, a World Conference is not an ordinary conference. It's about 2 years of meetings. There are regional UN meetings. There are a whole set of preparatory meetings at Geneva, UN headquarters in Geneva, before you went on to South Africa for the conference. When that World Conference process started, the white governments, the United States, Canada, the governments of the European Union said to us, this World Conference will have nothing to do with the transatlantic slave trade. It will have nothing to do with slavery being a crime against humanity. It will have nothing to do with reparations. That's what they said to us. We said to them, you have to be joking. You have to be joking. You cannot be talking about racism and you're not going to deal with the very roots of the system of racism. The transatlantic slave trade and the system of racialized chattel slavery that was imposed upon African people. So the battle lines were drawn from the very first preparatory meeting. And we had to fight them on this because they were accustomed to having their way. These are the big powers. So they were talking to us as if we are little children. They're telling us what the World Conference is to be about. But we fought them. And we fought them on the basis of unity and solidarity. We were able to bring together a Caribbean lobby. I'm talking at the governmental level. We were able to establish links with many of the governments of Latin America. We were able to come together with the governments of the newly formed African Union, the African governments. And we were able to bring on board with us important governments and nations from Asia. And we were so successful in defying these white powers that the World Conference did go on to deal with slavery, with transatlantic slave trade, with slavery being a crime against humanity, and with the notion of reparations. In fact, we were so successful in defying them that the United States walked out of the conference in South Africa because it had become clear that they were not going to get their way as to what the agenda of the conference would be. Yeah. Now, so that experience told me something. That experience told me that even in a multinational body like the United Nations, that if your cause is a just and righteous cause, and you pursue that cause with passion and conviction, that you can enlist the solidarity and support of world public opinion on your side, and you can isolate your enemies, regardless of how powerful they think they are. That was a very important insight for me. If you have a just and righteous cause, you can capture the conscience, not of those white nations, but you can capture the conscience of the world, Latin America, Asia, Africa. I am a member of the Barbados government's National Task Force on Reparations, right? The governments of the Caribbean community, there are 15 of them, from Haiti, Jamaica, Belize, Guyana, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, you know them all. 15, 14 of which are independent. One is still a colony, Montserrat. But in August of 2013, the governments of the Caribbean community, the heads of government agreed that they were going to be pursuing the governments of Western Europe for reparations for the genocide of the native people of the Caribbean, plus of the enslavement. And they agreed to set up a CARICOM Reparations Commission. And they further agreed that every individual CARICOM country would set up a national governmental committee that would work with the CARICOM Reparations Commission. So that has been done. There are 12 national committees. I sit as a member of the Barbados National Committee. And we are now in the process, we have just finalized our major report to the Barbados government, which is to be submitted to the Cabinet of Barbados. It is then to be submitted to the Barbados Parliament to be debated and approved by the Barbados House of Assembly. And in that report, we are proposing a whole number of initiatives that the Barbados government must now undertake to propel the process of reparations, including dealing with the fake news that every day is broadcast in the media in Barbados about the continent of Africa. So some very practical things as well. The governments of CARICOM also decided that they were going to be establishing a reparations research institution. That institution has been set up. It is going to be located at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies, and it is going to be officially launched in October. The head of it is going to be Professor Vereen Shepherd, all right? I am also the coordinator of something called the International Network in Defense of Humanity, the Caribbean chapter. The International Network in Defense of Humanity is an institution that was the brainchild of the late Fidel Castro and the late Hugo Chavez, the two of them. It is an anti-imperialist, institution as a network. It is global, but it is strongest in Latin America. It is very strong in Cuba, and we have set up a Caribbean chapter for the rest of the Caribbean outside of Cuba. And so we work very closely with revolutionary Cuba and revolutionary Venezuela. And we work very closely with them because basically those revolutionary countries are what they are attempting to do by their anti-imperialist policies is to challenge and weaken that imperialist, racist, capitalist structure that arose out of the centuries of slave trade, enslavement, of European underdevelopment of Africa, while at the same time building up that European civilization. So for us, any revolutionary government that is engaged in a process that is challenging and subverting that system, institutionalized system of white power, is a process that we must give solidarity to and help to support. Because when we talk about reparations, we are talking about a reconfiguration of the power structures of the world. So, we are talking about a fundamental challenge to the political and economic structures of the world that oppress, that historically have oppressed and exploited African people, and that continue to do so today. The final thing I want to mention now is I just came back from the Emancipation Festival in Trinidad. In Trinidad, we have a tremendous Emancipation Festival. Tremendous. It lasts for about 3 months. It climaxes on 1st of August with a parade of 20,000, 30,000 people, all bedecked in their African clothing. And it's a tremendous thing. And this year, we had a delegation from the African Union at the festival. So the executive of the Caribbean Pan-African Network met with them. And one of the things we discussed with them was reparations. And we said to them, look, CARICOM has forged ahead with this reparations initiative. The African continent used to be ahead of the Caribbean in reparations. In fact, the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, way back in 1992, had held the first Pan-African conference on reparations in Nigeria, Abuja, Nigeria. Out of that, they set up the group of eminent persons on reparations. They established a reparations commission, and they issued the Abuja Declaration, which said to the world, to the international community, that a debt is owed to the people of Africa and the African diaspora that is yet to be paid. And they sent a call to all African and diasporan nations to establish national reparations committees to work with the Organization of African Unity in taking forward the reparations struggle. Those African initiatives were very inspiring to us in the Caribbean. Now what happened was that in 1999, they made a decision to phase out the OAU and to replace it with the African Union. And this they did. But they made the error of not replicating in the African Union those reparations institutions. So the group of eminent persons was allowed to die, and the OAU's Reparations Commission was allowed to die as well. So the discussion we had was to say, look, CARICOM has forged ahead on this thing. We need the African Union to be there, shoulder to shoulder with CARICOM. And it was agreed that we, CPAN, would produce a paper explaining this that would ultimately be submitted to the, let's say, the higher levels within the African. I don't want to speak out of turn. But suffice it to say that an effort is currently underway to convince the African Union at its highest leadership that the AU needs to be there with CARICOM championing the reparation movement. Yeah. All right? So I wanted to say those things because those things will form a background to, and bear in mind, brothers and sisters, bear in mind, we talk about the diaspora, the damage that was done to us through the centuries of enslavement and what is owed to us. And quite often we forget the damage that was done to the continent of Africa itself, right? One of the best and most concise descriptions of what was done to the continent of Africa was produced by the great scholar Dr. Ivan van Sertima in his book Blacks in Science. Let me just read it, right? This is what he said. He said, no human disaster, with the exception of the flood, if that biblical legend is true, can equal in dimension of destructiveness the cataclysm that shook Africa. We are all familiar with the slave trade and the traumatic effect of this on the transplanted black, that is us in the diaspora. But few of us realize what horrors were wrought in Africa itself. Vast populations were uprooted and displaced. Whole generations disappeared. European diseases descended like the plague, decimating both cattle and people. Cities and towns were abandoned. Family networks disintegrated. Kingdoms crumbled. The threads of cultural and historical continuity were so savagely torn asunder that henceforth one would have to think of two Africas, the one before and the one after the Holocaust. End of quote. So we need to remember that. We need to remember that tremendous damage was inflicted on the African continent. And that is why the political leadership of the African continent has to take up this cause. Right? Now, I want to share with you something that I call the 10 fundamental principles of reparations, right? For me, brother said he don't like to say for me, for us, reparations is constructed around an inwardly directed struggle. There's an outwardly directed struggle where we target the representatives of those nations and institutions that committed the crime and that have to pay the compensation. And the inwardly directed struggle where we look within ourselves and do the job of repairing the damage that we know we need to do. In terms of what the reparations look like, the reparations will consist of money transfers, money payments, transfer of resources, developmental programs, and structural reforms in the institutional, international structure, as well as the institutional structure within our domestic societies as well. So, money, resource transfers, money payments, developmental programs, and structural reforms, structural transformations internationally, but nationally and domestically as well, right? Yeah. Now, let me talk about what I see as the 10 fundamental principles of reparations. And this is something that I put in the paper that I submitted to the African Union as well. Let me just quote. I said, it is against this background that we would now like to present a brief but important outline of the reparations concept in its holistic comprehensiveness by exploring what we have termed the 10 fundamental principles of reparations. These 10 principles are as follows. 1, validation of our humanity. The first and most basic principle of the reparations movement is that the very demand for reparations constitutes in itself an indispensable validation by African and African-descended people of our own precious humanity. You see, if we Africans fail to demand that the present-day representatives and beneficiaries of those institutions and nations that committed the most horrible crimes imaginable against our ancestors be held accountable and made to pay restitution, if we fail to make that demand, we would be implicitly sending a message to ourselves and to the world at large that we do not consider our ancestors or ourselves to be sacred beings imbued with inalienable rights and deserving of respect and justice. And so, the mere act of demanding reparations is important and is a critical component of the process that we must engage in as individuals and as a collective of repairing ourselves and of reaffirming the value of our civilization and heritage. So when people ask you about why y'all engage in this reparation, tell them, look, the mere just to make the demand, if you do nothing more, you simply make the demand.
Yeah, agree with you.
You are validating your humanity because you are saying nobody can come and commit those type of crimes against my ancestors and I have nothing to say about it. I don't demand justice in their name. If I don't demand justice, it means I am saying that we are really nothing. We don't really count. You can do what you like with us, and there's no accountability. All right? Clearly, any such validation of our humanity will have to begin with a knowledge of who we Africans were as a people before the criminal European impositions of slavery and colonialism. Thus, the reparations movement and the African and Caribbean governments that lead it, I'm writing this for the governments to persuade them to get involved, pre-colonial African civilization, as well as of the history of European orchestrated enslavement and its effects on the civilization of Africa and on the development of the modern world. All right? That's the first principle, right? So we're saying to the governments, if you're involved in reparations, you have a duty to promote the widespread study of our pre-slavery, pre-colonial civilization. All right? That's what we're saying to the government of Barbados and to all of the governments across the Caribbean. If you say that you are for reparations, then you have to begin there as governments. The second fundamental principle, completion of the emancipation process. This is important. Of course, the point must also be made that the racist oppression of black or African people did not end with the formal abolition of slavery. Indeed, after the abolition of slavery in the 19th century, our historical oppressors deliberately entrapped our ancestors in economic, political, and social arrangements that were designed to handicap them and to serve the interests of the former enslavers, arrangements that have persisted in modified form down to the present day. The struggle for reparations must therefore be, among other things, a struggle to expose and put an end to such arrangements and to complete the emancipation process. This is the second fundamental principle of the reparations movement. So reparations is not only about what happened in the past. No. It is about how the past has been continued in modified form into the present. Right? It goes without saying, therefore, that the reparations movement and our governments in particular must engage in an examination of our post-slavery history with a view to identifying the many ways in which our historical oppressors unlawfully enmeshed and entrapped post-slavery generations down to the present era. Right? And having properly informed ourselves, we must be prepared to undertake efforts to expose and deprecate such racist present-day arrangements, to advance demands that they be terminated, and to undertake relevant protests and boycotts, as well as forms of individual and collective state action to bring about the termination of all such still existing racist arrangements. So when the young people ask you, how does the reparations movement relate to the experience that they are living every day in Babylon? You have to tell them, look, reparations is not only addressing the past, it is also addressing the continuation of that oppressive past in modified form into the present. And so the reparations activists have to be in the vanguard of carrying out that analysis. How, when they said our people were given freedom, our people got their freedom in the 19th century, but we know, we in Barbados know, Immediately the Emancipation Act was passed. They passed something called the Masters and Servants Act. That tied the newly freed black to the plantation at slavery wages, and that Master and Servants Act existed for 100 years after the abolition of slavery. So, and that's just one example of oppressive arrangements that exist up to today. The reparations movement has to be about identifying those arrangements and removing them. Reparations, the second principle is that it is about completing the process of emancipation. The third principle, compensation must be proportionate to the crime. The demand for compensation from the present-day representatives of those who inflicted horrendous crimes on our ancestors and who damaged and disabled succeeding generations must consist of a demand for the transfer of material resources in an amount proportionate to the enormity of the crimes and their deleterious effects. Resources to enable present-day African and African descendant populations to counter the economic and social imbalances derived from those centuries of criminality. Now, the CARICOM countries have come forward with this 10-point plan. Reparations activists like myself do not consider that that 10-point plan comes anywhere close to being compensation proportionate to the crime. I want to make this point here. I want to make this point.
Very important. Very important.
Reparations is an issue that belongs to the African people. It does not belong to any government. Right? It is a sacred issue that is rooted in 500 years of the most horrendous oppression of African people.
That's right.
Right?
In the word.
But we have to engage with our governments in carrying forward the reparations cause. But we have to be the guardians of that cause. So we engage with them. But we don't just glibly accept their concepts of reparations. So for example, we engage with the CARICOM governments and the Reparations Commission. But we are telling them, look, you see this 10-point plan? You got to come again. Doesn't go far enough. Some of the language associated with it is unacceptable to us because some of the language does not sufficiently reflect that a crime was committed. You're not begging for anything. You're asking for, they're demanding justice and the just compensation for that crime. You see? But, so we engage. But we understand that we have to push our governments. We have to explain things to them. Some of them do not have the same profound understanding of the issue that we might have. So we push them. We hold them accountable. If we see them going off track, we chastise them. We do not permit them to in any way sell out the cause. All right? The reparations movement and the African and Caribbean governments that lead the movement are therefore expected to collectively discuss and work out with civil society and Pan-Africanists and other popular organizations ideas for appropriate reparations initiatives, payments, and programs that are capable of achieving that objective of the resources being proportionate to the evil effects of the crime. The fourth principle, reparations must produce the just society. The fourth fundamental principle is that the campaign for reparations or for reparative justice must be designed to produce the just society, in that the demand for reparations must be formulated as a demand for a fundamental transformation of the currently existing inequitable and exploitative economic and power relations that exist in the international arena and in many of our domestic societies. So when we talk about reparations, we are not talking about some little superficial reform. We are talking about bringing together, uniting the African people and their allies worldwide in a serious, concentrated effort to create the to demolish those structures of inequality and oppression and exploitation in the international arena and in our domestic societies. That's the structural reform we're talking about. Africans must exercise autonomy throughout the process. Now, that is a fundamental principle. You know, the CARICOM Reparations Commission has said that they would like to engage with these European governments, bring them to the table and engage as developmental partners in addressing the ill effects, the ill consequences that exist. We are saying, fine, we don't have a problem with making some effort to engage or collaborate, but understand that Africans must exercise, even while adopting this approach, we Africans and Afro-descendants make it absolutely clear to all and sundry that even though we value the concept of collaboration, that the strategies and tasks to be implemented for our psychological repair and for our economic and social empowerment are our own responsibility and will be conceptualized, directed, and controlled by us.
That's right.
We must repair ourselves. A critical component of the campaign for reparations is the Africans' own inwardly directed struggle for psychological, cultural, and spiritual self-repair. Thus, Africans and Afro-descendant members of the reparations movement and their governments must be committed as individuals and as collectives to seek to identify all of the ways in which we have been and continue to be negatively affected by false notions of white supremacy and black inferiority, and to rigorously attack them and eradicate the negative effects that impact its capacity to persuade a critical mass of the African population to re-evaluate themselves and their history, to perceive the gravity of the injustice, to feel the tragic historical loss they have suffered, and to be sufficiently motivated to get involved or otherwise support the campaign for reparations. So you see, you can't have self-repair here on one hand and the other thing on the other hand. They have to go together, because you are not going to win reparations unless it is a mass movement. And you are not going to persuade enough Africans to be involved with the reparations campaign in order to make it a mass movement unless you are able to get large numbers of our people to re-evaluate themselves, their history, the loss that they have suffered as a people, and to feel it in an emotional way. Right? Reparations must be a broad movement. Reparations, that's number 8. I'll get to the 10 quickly. The campaign for reparations must be designed, on the one hand, to bring on board with us all of our natural allies in Africa and the diaspora, Latin America and Asia, and to enlist the tremendous weight of world opinion on our side, and on the other hand, to isolate and publicly hold up to international embarrassment and critique all of those entities that perversely and unreasonably seek to deny and resist the manifest justice and righteousness of our claim to reparations. That is coming from my experience at the World Conference Against Racism. We have to isolate these white countries. We have to enlist the weight of world public opinion on our side and isolate them and embarrass them publicly. This will call for a concerted effort in the field of international diplomacy by the ambassadors, embassies, and foreign missions of the nations of CARICOM and the African Union. It will also require consistent effort at the General Assembly of the United Nations, the Organization of American States, the Commonwealth, and in other relevant international organizations. There must be a concerted effort at diplomacy. In other words, African and Caribbean and African ambassadors have to be visiting governments and foreign ministries all over the world, explaining the reparation cause, pulling them to our side. We want China with us. We want India with us. We want Pakistan. We want the Asiatic countries giving us support and solidarity. We will surely win the reparation struggle when, wherever in the world representatives of the legally responsible governments go, other governments and people of goodwill are constantly asking them about their long outstanding moral and legal debt to the people and nations of Africa and the African diaspora. Just as virtually the whole world has come to know about the horrors of the Jewish Holocaust and to acknowledge and respect the legitimacy and moral rightness of the Jewish demand for reparations, we too must bring about a similar state of affairs in world public opinion in relation to the African reparations cause. Right? 9, the mass of our people must be intimately involved. The masses of our African and Afro-descendant populations must be intimately involved in the campaign for reparations. They must be permitted enough time and opportunity to thoroughly discuss and understand the issue. Their right to have the final and decisive say on the concrete details of the reparations claim must be respected. And they must have a say through representatives specifically selected by them as to how the compensatory resources are utilized. Furthermore, at a national level, within our many nation states, the reparations movement should systematically appeal to and challenge all of the relevant local and national organizations to put support for reparations on their agenda and to include it in their programs and manifestos. Political parties, trade unions, youth organizations, churches, women's organizations, educational institutions, local government administrations, and the list goes on. There must also be no compromise on the requirement that the trustees of any reparations fund that emerges out of the reparations campaign must include, along with the governmental leadership, trusted representatives of the people directly selected by the people themselves for the special purpose of overseeing the expenditure of reparations resources. So you in Britain, you know who. You know who is the elder that you respect and trust. You know who you would trust to sit on a board of trustees overseeing a reparations fund, that you know you can trust them, right? And in the Caribbean, similarly, we would know the people. We would know who we trust, who has the integrity. So yes, governmental people will be there, but in addition, there must be trustees selected by the people. And finally, Glenroy, the final principle, network and establish a new international legal structure. The successful pursuit of reparations will require the establishment of a worldwide network of community, let me stress that, of a worldwide network of community, regional, national, and international organizations.
That's right.
Indeed, at the grassroots level, The community-based reparations organization must be linked into a national network, while at the level of our African and Caribbean governments, we should establish a transatlantic international network that is preparing and engaging in legal, diplomatic, and political strategies at the international level to achieve reparations. Yeah. The African and African descendants reparation claim or claims will either be consensually negotiated between mutually respectful state parties gathered around an international negotiating table, or it will have to be litigated in a series of international law cases brought against the governments of the liable nations. And since the reparations claim that is being advanced on behalf of the sons and daughters of Africa and the diaspora is of a magnitude and complexity hitherto unknown to the currently existing international court system, it may, in all likelihood, require the setting up of a special new international tribunal specifically designed by the member states of the General Assembly of the United Nations to deal with and do justice to a claim of this historical importance and magnitude. All right? Those for me are the 10 fundamental principles, right? And basically what we are saying is, look, this has to be a solid, focused movement, a worldwide movement of African people. You can't do it. You can't do it alone in Britain, and we in the Caribbean, and some African people somewhere else. This has to be a focus. This has to be a movement that unifies all of our people. Word. It has to be a movement that brings our governments on board. Now, we know that we have a lot of neo-colonial governments, right? But if there are many things you would not want to engage with some African and Caribbean governments on. But if there is one issue that you should feel confident in engaging them on, is if they say they are pursuing reparations. Because intrinsic to the concept of reparations is concepts of justice, restitution for our people, getting our people to know their history, to repair themselves, to challenge the world structures of oppression and exploitation of black people. So the point is, we must be firing on all cylinders. The governments must be involved, but we must be there as the guardians of the cause, explaining things to the government, holding them to the right path, chastising them when they need to be chastised, right? But we have to go forward in that way. So we have to unify the black world. And we have to get as many of our people, the masses of our people, engaged in the movement. And that can only come through education and knowing the history and feeling the historical loss and connecting with it at an emotional level. So those things are symbiotic. Those things reinforce one another. They go together. And then we must then, as a unified black or African force, we must look for powerful allies. We must look Latin America, Nicaragua, this country, China, thing. We want, wherever these European powers go, they want to go and negotiate some trade deal or some trade thing with some Asiatic country, but the people say to them, but, yeah, you all want to, but what about the debt that you all owe to the people of Africa and the African diaspora? In other words, it must become such a moral touchstone. We must so touch the conscience of the world. You know, you can't turn on your TV, you see something about the Jewish Holocaust. We must so educate the people of the world, not the white people. We might have some white allies too, who knows? You might find some white allies. I think Norway has said, I think it's Norway or Sweden who have said, yes, they recognize the legitimacy of the Caribbean claim for reparations, and they would be willing to discuss it. So you do have, all of them are not like Britain and France and the United States, who are really disgusting in their moral blindness, who would tell you that they don't want any reparations because slavery was legal. Imagine that. To brutalize, to rape, to murder, you know, to brand, to dehumanize. They say it was legal. So we don't owe you all anything. Because when we did all those things to you all, it was legal. And you know why it was legal? Because they get in their parliament and they pass a law and say, you know, these people from Africa, they're really people, you know. They're things. They're animals. You know? But you could pass a million laws trying to convert human beings into animals and things, they remain human beings. So when your law told you it was a criminal act to murder a white human being, it was also a criminal act to murder a black human being. That black human being was not a thing. It was not a chattel. He was not an animal. He was a human being.
That's right. That's right.
If it was a crime to rape one, if it was a crime to rape a human being, but that black person remained a human being.
That's right.
It was a crime when you raped her as well. You see? So I'm saying to my brothers and sisters, we have to build this unity. It must be a cause that unifies the black world and unifies people of color, of goodwill, who will recognize the righteousness of our cause and offer support and solidarity. And as we isolate those countries and we turn the screws on them, this is when we will get our reparations. So the job now, the CARICOM governments have stepped forward. The job now is to get the African governments as well. And our civil society, our Pan-Africanists. We all must be there together, not just following blindly any government, being the guardian of the cause, but still engaging and working together.
I do want to say, though, that David will still be here, and there is an event on the 26th at our house, at the Mahat Center, down the road, where we won't have this time constraint, and Elder Pepperkai is in the house, and I'd like to give thanks in advance to the possibility that we can have a greater discussion with David. What I want to do is give opportunity for people now to ask questions. I'm going to limit it.
If any efforts being done to create any curriculum along the education of our children as they're coming up in the ranks, to kind of prepare them for self-repair, to repair the damage, because most of the Caribbean governments are run by African people. So are there any efforts being done in that department to bring repairing on that level to our people? Thank you.
Okay, I want to take 5.
To African liberation. But one word of caution, when you talk about allies, be very careful. Because nobody loves us, and nobody come amongst us to do us any good. So don't believe that the Chinese, the Indian, they're ready to support.
You mentioned about Venezuela. I would like to know how they're going to support us, because they, at the moment, have got a lot of issues. And could you also explain what has caused their issues? Because that I found very confusing, and I'd like a little bit more information on that.
Thanks, sir.
I think I can do without a mic. However, David, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation this evening. Now, I noticed that you're Vincentian born. And what I want to know is, how do you kind of bring the, how do you sort of excuse the present regime in St. Vincent having such a prominent role in the reparation movement in the Caribbean with what you're saying.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Tenawari.
Tenawari.
I just want to ask a question about when Uncle David, he said that to get the reparations back, we need to unite all of the African people. How are we going to unite the African people that have been lured away from their Africanness? Like those people that are paid to be the prime ministers of countries that are puppets of the French, the English. How do we get them back?
Historians, people like Hilary Beckles. Beckles' last book, The First Black Slave Society. He brought up this one, Britain's Black Debt. It's followed up with The First Black Slave Society. And not only Beckles, but we have a number of indigenous black historians producing brilliant work in the Caribbean. When I went to secondary school in the 70s in Barbados, we had to rely on a whole set of colonialist type histories and so forth. Now we have our own scholars producing brilliant work. But do you know something? At the same time that that is happening, the educational authorities are phasing history out of the curriculum. So when you finally have the work that can really lay bare the history, but again, that's one of the points in the report that the Barbados National Task Force has made to the government of Barbados. That look, and this is why the reparations thing is so valuable, that if we have committed to a reparation cause, then there are a number of things that are concomitant with that commitment. One of those things is the history must be in the schools. Secondly, you can't have your national TV station broadcasting every night a whole set of fake news about Africa. Right? We got to correct those things. So the point I'm making is that the reparations cause and the fact that these governments have committed themselves to it gives us an opportunity to push those positions, you see? And to my sister from St. Vincent, we have to give a lot of credit. Whatever you think about Ralph Gonzalez, we have to give a lot of credit to Gonzalez in pushing this cause, right? From the time, the Barbados National Task Force was the one that really came up with the idea of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. We were planning to hold a meeting, a conference in the Caribbean, but we were not sure. We had doubts. How are we going to get these CARICOM governments to commit to reparations? I spoke to Ralph about the idea. Ralph took it up and ran with it. And through his initiative, through his dynamism, he was able to bring them to the table. And we were able to get all of them to commit to pursuing the cause of reparations. And then he held the first follow-up conference in St. Vincent, where we worked out the parameters of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, the terms of reference, and all of that. So he has to be given a lot of credit for what has transpired at the level of the Caribbean community. All right? Alliances with other nations, well, I understand the point the brother is making, but we must not close our minds to that possibility. Because, as I said, I would not have said this unless I had seen it work at the United Nations. I saw it work. I saw that it is possible. If your cause is a just and righteous one, it is possible. And if you articulate it with conviction and passion and integrity, that you can get people on board to at least say we acknowledge the justice of this cause. we support the justice of this cause. So I'm not saying that you blindly, that you go in with your eyes shut, but you do make the effort. Obviously we have to start with the core of African people and African and black governments. But to the extent that we could then add to that core with other allies, other non-white governments and nations that are willing to give some solidarity and support. That is a mission that we should pursue. And the young brother is, the young brother is right to say what he said, right? Because when we got to Durban, during all the preparatory meetings in Geneva at the UN headquarters, the African ambassadors were there with us, fighting this cause. When we got to Durban, you had presidents of Africa like Wade from Senegal, Obasanjo from Nigeria, and a few others, who sold out the cause at Durban. And I met the Nigerian ambassador with tears running down his face. And he could not look me in the eye. And he's telling me, my brother, I'm sorry, I apologize, my brother. And I said to him, well, I know it's not your fault. I know how hard he fought. I know how hard he fought. He was a big, tall, regal African brother. He was always resplendent in his African robes at the UN headquarters in Geneva. And I know how hard he fought for that cause. And the brother was reduced, a big man, a big royal human being was reduced to tears and shame, right? So yes, we do have those kinds of sellout, quisling leaders. But, so there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees, right? There are no guarantees. But we have to get on. We have to get on with the task. We can't say, well, we know that some of them are going to be sellouts, so we don't even bother to. No, that would be wrong. Because at the end of the day, we have a right to demand that they behave in a certain way. We have a right as African people. So yes, they may sell out, but we have the right to make those demands upon them. And to the extent, the point I'm making is this. To the extent that they say, we are committed to a reparations cause. That's what the Caribbean leaders have said, We didn't say that for them. They said, we are committed to pursuing reparations. We are setting up a CARICOM Reparations Commission. We are setting up national reparations committees. We are establishing at the University of the West Indies a reparations research institute. To the extent that they say that, then we have something to work with. Which doesn't mean that some of them may not sell out somewhere along the way, but at least we have something to work with. And that is what I want with Africa now. I want Africa to say, yes, in principle, we are part of this. We are coming on board. We are setting up an African Union Reparations Commission. Then we now need to take them at their word. Yeah, we took you all seriously. We didn't think you were making joke. You're committed, so we now engaging with you. And we are pushing you. That's where, if you say that you're committed, that's where you're supposed to be going. Right? But we don't have any guarantees. The traitors can still emerge. But we have to move forward in a positive spirit. Finally, Venezuela. Listen. Were it not for Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, many of those small Eastern Caribbean islands would not have survived the international recession that emerged in 2008. Chavez came to in a brotherly way, with Petrocaribe, Chavez came with this principle of prosper thy neighbor. Whatever resources, he said, look, we want a new set of international relations. We don't want international relations now based on just extracting profits. We want a set of international relations based on solidarity and nations sharing resources. So a lot of the Eastern Caribbean countries were able to survive because Petrocaribe was not only about oil prices and access to oil, but it was also about economic and social development programs as well, right? And you see, okay, that Bolivarian revolution, right? Petrocaribe, the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, excluding the United States and Canada. In other words, you have this organization of African states with the United States dominating it. These guys come and said, look, we are organizing the hemisphere, but we're leaving out the two of them. So it exists. ALBA, the Bolivarian Alliance. Telesur, he said, we want to set up a television network of the South. We want our own CNN of the southern countries. Banco Sur, we want to do a similar thing. We don't want to be dependent on IMF anymore. We're going to set up a bank of the South. So that Bolivarian revolution was a very powerful thing. And the United States recognized that if they can knock out Venezuela, all of these arrangements will collapse because Venezuela is the cornerstone. So that's why they're going after Venezuela so terribly. And a lot of what you were seeing on the Western media is propaganda. It's fake news. I go to Venezuela, I can tell you a lot of it is propaganda, which is not to say, sister, yes, the oil prices fell. Yes, with the death of Chavez, Venezuela lost an inspirational leader. Yes, some corruption set in, and as a result of some corruption setting in, some of the working class people of Venezuela started to back off. So they're not blameless, right? The government is not blameless, but they have to. But the working class people haven't gone to the opposition, you know, because the opposition are the oligarchy, but they simply withdrew. So what they have to do now is to recapture. It's to recapture the vast.
I want to take some more. I've got Sam, and I'll note the others, but Sam, please, question, not comments, please. Thanks.
No comments, I see.
Around 2008 or thereabout, he happened to maneuver himself to be the chair of the African Union. And they asked him about reparations. What did he say? It's too complicated. Thank you.
I want this is in relation to the 10-point reparation plan. I think there's something missing, something that's come up before. And when we look at the whole history of enslavement and what has been done to people of African heritage, I would make the case that as African women, there is a unique and specific set of circumstances that apply to us in relation, because let's not forget, we were the ones who were raped. I mean, obviously brothers were raped too, but we were predominantly raped and impregnated and used as mechanisms to carry on this trade. And there's a whole bunch of issues around reproduction, around the position of women. So my question to you is, for example, you've got this 10-point reparations plan, the CARICOM have got this as well. Is the Achilles heel in the reparations movement?
Brother David, brilliant presentation, and want to commend you on the excellent work that you have been doing on behalf of the African world community. And we look forward to organizing ourselves even better in Africa, UK, to support that fantastic work that you're doing. Tendai Mari. You'll be well aware, Brother David, that the Bolivarian Revolution was fueled by support and resource and financed by the Haitian Revolution. Notwithstanding that those Bolivarian states did collude with the United States to isolate Haiti in the region, as Haiti was seeking to establish itself as a nation. How do we interpret that contradiction as we move forward with our reparations campaign? How do we interpret and address the contradiction that, notwithstanding the virtues of such socialist states as Venezuela and Cuba, they have not resolved the contradiction of racism, domestic racism, to the point that as a friend of both Venezuela and Cuba, the organization Trans Africa had to interrogate that issue with them at different points. How do we address that contradiction as we seek allyship in the campaign for reparations going forward? Tendai Mari.
Tendai Mari.
What I'd like to say though is we are only now beginning to get a true sense of the horror that was inflicted on our people, right? That's part of the point I was making about Beckles' book, right? Every book that Beckles brings out, he is digging deeper. He is enriching the analysis. This book is really a watershed book for Barbados. Every Barbadian needs to read this book because this is the first book about the history of Barbados that really plumbs the depths of the horror of the oppression. Right? And so
What was it called?
the first Black Slave Society, Britain's Barbarity Time in Barbados, 1636 to 1876. Britain's Barbarity Time in Barbados, right? So the more that these kinds of work, this kind of research and analysis and historical writing is done, that's all part of that whole process. That process of getting to really understand this history. I tell a lot of people in Barbados, they talk about the Bussa Rebellion. And you speak glibly, oh, there was something called the Bussa Rebellion. And, Bussa and them were killed. But that superficial statement doesn't begin to come to terms with the horror of what was inflicted on children, women, and men. The depths of the depravity, right? So I'm saying that all of this is still a work in progress. We are still only now really beginning to understand what this history really was all about. So in that spirit, I would say it is a learning curve for us as well. What our women really went through, what our men, what our children, And yes, I would just say that yes, I take the point, but we are all now really learning about ourselves and what our true historical experience has been and why we don't recognize that post-traumatic slave syndrome. We don't recognize it, or some of us don't even recognize that it is a valid concept because we have not understood the depths of the depravity that was imposed upon our ancestors. Grassroots organizing. Well, there's a lot that we still have to do, right? There's a lot. But in 12 CARICOM countries now, you have 12 national reparations committees, right? 3 years ago, we did not have that. That exists. That now creates at least an institutional structure in each of those countries that grassroots could relate to, could, get some energy from, could engage with. So I'm saying, what you're saying is critical, because as I said, reparations has to be a mass movement. It has to be a mass movement. We have to find a way to make it into a mass movement. And it will only become a mass movement if we spread that education, if we engage in that grassroots organizing. So if that is the mission, we now have to identify all the resources that exist to help us to create that mass movement. So I'm saying in the Caribbean, we have to make use of these national committees. We have to make use of the propositions that are being put to the government that the history has to be on the curriculum and these kinds of things. So basically what I'm saying is we have a lot of work to do. That's the truth. The truth is that we have a lot of work to do on this issue. Somebody said this is not going to be a short sprint. It's not going to be a short sprint. We have our work cut out. But as we develop this reparations campaign, we will immediately begin to see the positive results, because it's not about some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. As we go through the process of organizing ourselves in pursuit of reparation, doing the educational work, doing the unity and solidarity work at many levels, at community levels, at governmental levels. Part of the thing, look, you all are here, many of you, Caribbean descent, some African descent, black people living in the belly of the beast. These Caribbean and African embassies here should be engaged in an intimate relationship with the African people of Britain. They should see you all as their constituents, their people. That's how I relate to. That is how we relate to the Cuban and Venezuelan governments in Barbados. We relate in that way. Very solid. A similar thing. We have to push that idea. We have to push that idea. In the United States, you have a Trump. You have well, you always have racists in the White House, but maybe a more overt racist. Caribbean governments have to see that the African American people are our brothers and sisters. Our prime ministers and foreign ministers got to raise their voices too. When there's some racist, like every year, the United States government, the State Department, arrogates to themselves the right to give a report card on human rights all across the world. So why can't Caribbean prime ministers and foreign affairs ministers and attorney generals get it into their heads that when there's some racist, horrific outrage against the African American people, that they have a right to intervene and to speak out and to denounce it? It's also all of that, if we are really serious about this reparations thing, it is that level of solidarity and unity that we are going to have to build. Or the new UN, a new World Conference. But look, anything, you see, okay, Cuba, let's look at Cuba. Every 2 years, Cuba comes to and calling for it to be terminated. When they first started, there were only a few countries that supported Cuba. They brought it year after year. Year after year. Now, the whole of the United Nations, with the exception of about 2 countries, the only countries is the United States, Israel, and sometimes the Czech Republic. Everybody else is voting with Cuba now, you see? So yes, I believe that we need to make use of every opportunity for international diplomacy. We need to use these bodies. Yes, they're all flawed bodies, right? Okay, I mean the OAS is a flawed body, but you know what? We were able to get behind the scenes, pushing these CARICOM governments not to vote with the United States and the OAS to give them a resolution that they can use against Venezuela, to invade Venezuela, right? And because we have 14 votes at the OAS, the resolution that they really want requires a 2/3 majority. But with our 14 votes, they can't get that 2/3 majority. And even when they were able to split our unity and to get some of the CARICOM governments to vote with them, they still, the ones that held firm, still denied them that 2/3 majority, you see? So we need to use, yes, the UN might be a flawed thing, but the General Assembly is where the numbers count. Numbers count. And just my brother here. Okay, Bolivar. Right, okay, you see what you said? Bolivar went to Haiti, down and out. Down and out. He was on the verge of giving up the struggle to liberate Latin America. Alexander Petion gave him arms and money, but on the promise. But on the promise that every part of the Latin American territory he liberated, he would abolish slavery. And Bolivar did follow through. Bolivar was true to his word, right? But remember, yeah, Bolivar did. But remember, at the end of Bolivar's life, Bolivar said, I have plowed the ocean. In other words, Bolivar felt that his life work had been in vain because the countries that, the nations that were set up went so contrary to what his revolutionary principles were. He died a man in despair. He said, I've wasted my life. I have spent my life plowing the ocean. And that's how he died. He died as a defeated man because the nations that he helped set up and liberate, what they turned out to be was a great disappointment to him. So when Chavez came, yes, so Latin America went through that period of real neo-colonial, backward, oppressive countries, oligarchies in place. But when Chavez came now, Chavez said, look, I am going to resurrect Bolivar's revolution. That's why he called it the Bolivarian Revolution. He says, I am going, those principles that Bolivar had, I am going to resurrect them, and I am going to bring about the completion of Bolivar's revolution in this period. So I would agree with you that there's that checkered history. There are a lot, much of the Latin American history very backward, but it is, and Chavez, being of indigenous and African descent. So they began now for the first time to address those issues of race. Chavez established for the first time the Africa South America Summit, where, so yes, we can't just, we have to look at Latin America with a sophisticated analysis, because not every regime there is revolutionary or anti-racist. But I tell you something, on that issue of race, we engage with the Cubans and Venezuelans, the Pan-Africanists in Barbados, and we educate them on the issue of race and racism. In other words, we don't put any punches. When we engage in a very intimate way, but we bring our principles, our anti-racist, our pro-Africa, and that is how we have to engage. That is how they have to learn from us too. Where they are, they have to learn from us. They have to hear from us. We engage, but we don't. It's not, you don't hold back your words or hold back your views, because they're going to learn. They need to hear from you too. You need to raise the issues with them, and if they're good comrades, they will hear what you are saying, and they will learn. So I've seen ambassadors develop, get a better understanding of issues of race and African culture and African struggle. I've seen that personally, but it's how you engage with them too. You must not pull back.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder that David will be speaking on the 26th at the Mahat Center, which is just across the road, 366 High Road, Tottenham. It's tradition within our event that we ask an elder to give us his opinion and take 2 minutes to tell us how he felt the conference has gone. We are trade unionists, we have people, workers ready to go, so we're not going to keep them long. But I asked Frank, who has been a stalwart within the RMT, to make some closing remarks Frank.
Thank you very much. Okay, good.
I hope you're not going to add this to the 2 minutes. I don't know when it became 2 minutes, but anyway. Again, the 11th year, and we have managed, I think, to pull off another good conference. Sister Hajar's trip to India, as she's explained to us what she's seen over there, it, strange enough, drops onto something that Brother David had just said. When the Mohan, who is the person we invited over here for our conference, when I picked him up at King's Cross, and we were crossing the road, I don't know if you know the situation with a rabbit in the headlights. As we were crossing the road, he stopped, and he's looking at the bus, and I'm saying, "Oh, come on, what's up?" He said, "There's a black man driving that bus." You know? So I said, "So what's wrong with that?" But to him, this is a strange concept. You know, in India, or the parts he's come from, there's no such thing. This is a university-educated person. I've never seen a black man driving a bus. See, so, and I personally think the road to reparations, when you get on that road, it is a road to education. You become so educated, you learn, you see what's going on. I could answer the Bolivarian question, but, you know, we're here to learn, you know, and it is such, the question that Minarazi asked, but I can see he's dropped out. It's so, one of the things that used to puzzle me about if we do get reparations, what's going to happen to these Caribbean leaders that they've got? And I'm glad that was answered today. You know, we've got to keep a tight rein on them. Anyway, I've got to thank Sister Haj for her marvelous contribution. Thank Brother Dave for this knowledge. And again, Glenroy has pulled it off. He pulleys his way through, but it's all here. It's all in a good cause. Okay. Thank you, and we hope to see you next year at the next conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Frank and I have tried to work together, and Frank's trying to pretend he's not part of this process, but he very much is. Thank you all again. Next year, please don't anybody ask me when it's going to be. It will forever be on the 23rd of August, and anyone, or 23rd of Messiah, and anyone who don't know why, it is because it's the day of the revolution in 80 when it started and liberated our people on that island and ended enslavement. There are some refreshments in the bar. Please stay with us for a little while and interact. Thank you very much. Good night.